This lecture will be going over Chapter 10, Section 1, Mexico, Colonialism and Independence. Chapter 10, Section 1, Objectives, explain colonialism and independence in Mexico. Number 2, understand the blending of native and Spanish influences in Mexico. Number 3, understand the economies of cities and factories in Mexico. And number 4, explain Mexican life today. The first thing that we're going to do is that we're going to look at a map of Mexico. As you can see, Mexico is going to have a lot of kind of tan area kind of going right through the middle right here. This is of course going to be mountain ranges. There are also going to be deserts. We can go ahead and we can see, if we kind of zoom out a little bit, we can see California here, and this is what we call Baja California. This is part of California. This is part of Mexico, and what we'll see in other parts of Mexico is that you're going to see kind of this range right here where it's going to be a little bit more difficult to live, but you are going to see some good vegetation on the east and west sides, and especially in this part right here. So if we go ahead and we look, the first thing that we're going to be talking about is the Native American and the Spanish conquest. What we see is Native people are going to go ahead and they're going to be in this area for a long period of time. You're going to see the Toltecs, the Maya, the Aztecs, all of them are going to be around this area. Now the Spanish conquest is going to be led by a guy by the name of Hernando Cortez. Cortez, they say, had an appetite for exploration, and he also was kind of a harsh man when it came to dealing with the people that he was trying to conquer. Cortez is going to go ahead and he's going to land in Mexico in about 1519. Now what's so amazing about 1519 and Cortez landing there is that the Aztec calendar is actually going to predict that a god will arrive in 1519. And what happens is that the Aztec people are actually going to think that Cortez was a god, not only because he landed in 1519, but he's also going to ride up on these big, beautiful horses, and people actually thought that he was a man with the body of a horse. But what we see though is that Cortez is going to go ahead and he's going to march to Tenochtitlan, which is at the site of the present day Mexico. Now the conquest is going to be completed by 1521, and what we see is that it happened very quickly for a number of reasons. Number one, Cortez is going to be a battle veteran, and he's going to be able to come in and destroy the population. He's also going to be considered a god, as we talked about before. He's going to have things like horses and guns, which is going to enable him to conquer much faster. But the number one thing that the Spaniards brought are going to be diseases. If you remember in your science classes about inoculations and things like that, basically the Spaniards that came to this area of Mexico City, they introduced things like sicknesses and the flu and everything that the Mexican people really didn't know about. And so what you see is that they're able to conquer this land because the people were so weak because of basically the illnesses that they had not been inoculated. What we see is that Spain is going to go ahead and they're going to be looking for gold and silver, and they believe that Mexico is an important part of that. Now you are going to see the Aztecs, which is a group that does have a lot of gold, and so they're going to go ahead and they're going to try and take them over, and this is going to bring more and more of the Spaniards over. What you do see is Augusto de Azpide is going to lead in 1821 Mexican independence, and he becomes emperor. However, in mid-1800s, Benito Juarez is going to lead a reform, becomes president. He seeks the separation of church and state, better education, and more even distribution of land. You're going to see these things in a lot of things that we talk about. Separation of church and state is something that we're talking about in present-day United States. Better education is things that many people throughout history are looking for, and a more even distribution of land. What that means is that they're going to want to give people land so that they can work on them and they can become wealthy if they do in fact work hard. Now, what you're going to see is Porfirio Diaz is going to follow Juarez, but he is a very harsh, corrupt ruler, and it's going to last about 30 years. Madero, Villa, Zapata is also they're going to kind of get together and lead a revolution, and a new 1917 constitution is going to give half of the farmland to the peasants. And what that is going to kind of introduce is going to introduce kind of a new way of treating the peasants people there. The problem is that the Institutional Revolutionary Party is a new political party in 1929. It brings stability to kind of an area that kind of is going, kind of having wars and fighting and things like that about who should become leader. But democracy, which they are trying to institute, is undermined by fraud and corruption. When I was a college student and getting my master's degree, I ended up looking and I took a course over Central and South America, including Mexico. And what you find is that there's a lot of fraud and a lot of corruption. People are trying to help these areas of people become a little bit wealthier, a little bit better off. A lot of the effects of colonialism in places like Central and South America, and also you're going to see it in Africa, is that when you have a colonial ruler that is so dominant, they're going to go ahead and they're going to be looking for to make money any way that they can. And what you see is that when people basically get rid of those corrupt rulers, they in fact become corrupt because they're looking to get money as much as they can. Mexico has had a history of this. The National Action Party's Vincent Fox becomes president in 2000, and what you see is the PRI's 71-year rule ends and Mexico is going to become more democratic. Now, going back to the Aztecs. The Aztecs are going to go ahead and they're going to be in the Valley of Mexico, which the center is going to be the capital known as Tenochtitlan. Cortez and the Spanish destroy the capital, and they're going to build Mexico City in their ruins. Again, this is going to be a situation where Cortez does it very quickly, really from the help of diseases. Now, the Spanish are going to bring their own language, religion. The Indian heritage does stay strong. There's going to be a large mestizo population. This is a mix of Spanish and Native American heritage. What happens is that during this time, there's kind of a hierarchy. And what you see is that the people that are going to be born in Spain that came to Mexico are going to be kind of on the top of the hierarchy. People that were born of Spanish blood, that means the mother and the father are going to be Spanish, but born in the colonies are going to be kind of the second tier people. The third tier people are going to be these mestizos, people that had one parent Spanish and one person Native American. And then underneath those people, kind of far below, are going to be the people that are going to be Native Americans, and also you're going to see African slaves. And these are going to be people that are basically going to basically feel the wrath of the Spanish. Now, what we see is that you're going to see some Mexican painters that are going to be very famous. Frida Kahlo is going to be one of the more famous painters that's going to be a little bit famous for her drawings on self-portraits. Here's an example of this right here. So what we see is that Mexico has a very good culture, but it's very much dependent on Spain. And what we see is that anytime you have a colonial ruler, those colonial rulers a lot of times are going to kind of have their footprints left over from generation to generation. An example of this is the United States. We speak English because England was our colonial ruler. Now, Native Americans are going to construct beautiful pyramids and temples, palaces. You're going to see the Spanish are going to build missions with these huge cathedrals. So you're going to see architecture being very important in these cultures. Now, in the populations, people are moving to the cities to seek better jobs. We, of course, know this as urbanization. 1970, the population is going to be doubled in the year 2000. And so what we see is people continually are moving to the cities. Now, we have Gulf and oil reserves are going to help Mexico develop industrial economy and manufacturing. Many new factories show up on the border. So what we're going to see is that, and if you guys see my drawing right here, what you're going to see is that this is going to be the border between Mexico and Texas. And so what happens is that right along this border, you're going to go ahead and you're going to have factories. These factories are going to be called maquiladoras. Now, what's so important about this is that the owner of these factories actually are going to be in Texas or the United States. And so what they do is that they go into Mexico, they build these factories, and they have people from Mexico that actually work in these factories. You may ask, why do they do this? They do this because what they want to do is be able to pay the laborers less money. In the United States, we have a very high minimum wage, where in Mexico, they have little to no minimum wage. And so what you can do is that as a factory owner, you can go to Mexico, build these factories, and pay people a lot less, and then you can go ahead and make more money on products that are essentially cheaper. This right here becomes that maquiladora system that becomes so very important. Now, an important part to this is going to be NAFTA. If we go back to the drawing here, what the United States does is that any items that come from a place like Mexico that comes into the United States, they're going to have to go ahead and they're going to have to pay taxes. And in those taxes, what happens is they're called protective tariffs, which means the people in the United States are going to want to buy the product that is made in the United States and not the product that is going to be made outside the United States. That's the theory on protective tariffs. Now, you might ask and say, well, what about the maquiladoras? Don't they have to pay to bring this item into the United States? Well, as of right now, and we are in 2017, as of right now, there is something that is called NAFTA. NAFTA is a North America Free Trade Agreement. This is with the United States and Canada. And what we see is and also Mexico, And what we see is that these items that are made in Mexico are able to be brought into Texas, but because of NAFTA and the Free Trade Agreement, what we see is that they don't have to pay protective tariffs. And so what we see then is that the United States is able to, with these factories along the border, they're able to make the products cheaper and not pay these protective tariffs at all. Makes it so that the United States is able to gain prosperity. And what this also does is this also helps Canada and Mexico, which basically allows them to become our trading partner. If you look at our top 10 trading partners from the United States, Canada and Mexico are actually in the top 5. Now, the last thing that we talk about is immigration and employment and education. Immigration, there's a 2,000-mile border with the United States and Mexico, and many of the workers are going to travel to Mexico from Mexico to the United States. Now, they're going to leave their families. Workers are going to be going to the United States, and when they have their families back in Mexico, they're going to send money, and they're going to return with savings. Now, this is obviously controversial during this period of time because some people are saying that we should stop the immigration. Some people are saying that we should continue to allow it to happen. One thing I want to show you right here is the immigration is an E. Immigration could be spelled two ways. Immigration with an E means that the people are leaving or exiting the country. Immigration with an I means countries are having the people come into their country. So as you can see right here, we're talking about Mexico, and the immigration is that they are leaving Mexico to come to the United States. So if they're leaving, it is with an E. If we were talking about the United States and Mexico with the immigration, that we are going to go ahead and spell with an I because they're coming into the United States. Finally, employment and education. There's a growing population. Government policies are creating a shortage of jobs. Many Mexicans migrate to the United States for work, but they can't get good jobs. The one thing that we do see is that school attendance is improving. 85% of school-age kids are actually in class, which is allowing for a more educated population. This concludes Chapter 10, Section 1. Make sure at this time you go ahead and you complete the assessments.